Thank you. Right, good morning everybody. This is Councillor David Jones, Chair of Children, Young People and Skills Committee. It's the 4th of March 2021 and we will be kicking off now. So welcome to the press and any members of the public who are listening on the World Wide Web. I'd just sort of like to say thank you for everybody who's prepared the work for this morning, because obviously there's quite a few things that will be going on. So just to start things off, I know sort of time seems to be accelerating because it doesn't seem 5 minutes ago since we last had a meeting. I know February was very busy, and since the last meeting, Kath and I have met with the Children's First Hub at Castleford, Airedale, Pontefract and Nottingley team, which was a very interesting briefing outlining the work now being done to support families through early interventions and that. I've also met with Carmen Gibson Holmes, who's also presenting this morning, for a briefing on CAMS, which obviously will go into much more detail a little bit later. I also have a regular meetings with a team of youth workers who we've been running a project with in Pontefract under the Active and Inspire, and it's proved to be very interesting, particularly obviously the work that they're now doing, going out and about in the evenings and engaging with young people and sort of picking up on all the different issues and pressures that they're feeling at the moment. I'd also like to probably just go back a little bit over some work that we did last year, which was the fetal alcohol syndrome disorder. I know I was passed an article a couple of days ago on this, and it's sort of just reminding that there is still lots to be done. And also, interestingly, there was an article attached to the thing called Byline Times, which was on alternative provision, which also proved to be very interesting. So I might obviously have to say a few things about that later. But we're certainly in a position now where hopefully things are beginning to move in a positive direction, as hopefully our children will be returning to school over the next week. Although I am aware that despite what some parts of the media might be saying, schools have been open, teachers have been teaching, and children have been learning, just in different ways. But we have to hope now that as the children return to school, that they start to pick up the pieces of what's been a very disjointed year, that we're still able to read articles that say that they recognise that schools have been open and they keep on doing the job. So however, no matter what the technology is, you still can't beat being in a school. Having said that, I know many teachers and parents are nervous about the return, which I'm sure is very, very understandable. So that's from me. I have apologies under agenda item 2, which is from Keith Garforth, who's unable to access the meetings, Monica Graham, Usman Ali, and also I need to say that Kath will be departing at 11:30. Have we got anything else on that one, please, Karen?
Yes. Stuart Piper's just put in his apologies.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. Okay, so agenda item 3, which is members' declarations. Are there any declarations of interest? I'll take silence as no for that. Can we have a look then at the minutes of the Children's, Young People and Skills Committee held on the 28th of January and again on the 4th of February, which is on pages 1 to 11. If we just sort of go through, which will be through the minutes, is there anything that anybody wishes to draw attention to? Page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. Can I pick up on, sorry, yeah, it's all right. Can I go back to page 4, please? Under, which is what, paragraph number 48, I think it's just the points of saying that it's absolutely vital, where it says Elaine Armstrong informed members that there were 5 members of staff within the team who ensured that children, young people and their families have their voices heard, which is, I think this continues to be absolutely vital during this period of time that we do listen to young people. And page 6. And then on to February the 4th, page 7. Page 8. page 9, page 10 and page 11. Can I have these minutes approved, please? Somebody from us present at all the meetings?
Move them, Chair, Stuart.
Right, thank you very much. Thanks, Stuart. And obviously, as there's silence, we will accept the minutes for both sets of meetings. Okay. So, can we now move on to, there's no urgent items, so we can go on to agenda item 6, which is children's emotional and mental well-being. There isn't a written report, but everyone is aware of the disruption caused to children and young people's education and other activities as a result of the current pandemic. As part of the improvement programme updates, the committee has been made aware of some of the changes in emotional and mental well-being support, including improvements in access to services as a result of significant reductions in waiting times. Organisations and how they fit into provision of a post-16 provision, and how apprenticeships are up. I've got in the wrong page here. Sorry, moving on. Sorry, I've got too many pages in front of me. So I'll go to significant reductions in waiting time. So apologies to Carmen. Can I welcome Carmen Gibson-Holmes, CAMS General Manager, and Dave Ramsey from South West Yorkshire Partnership NHS Trust. Carmen's been invited to discuss children's emotional and mental well-being, in particular the impact of the pandemic, the types of issues that children are experiencing, the support being provided, and the likely long-term consequences for children's mental health. So, Carmen, I'd like to invite you to speak now. Obviously, you're going to be giving a PowerPoint presentation, so just allow a few seconds to get sorted out. So over to you, Carmen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for inviting us here this morning. As you introduced me, I'm Carmen Gibson-Holmes, General Manager of Wakefield CAMS. I'll let my colleague Dave introduce himself while I upload the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Carmen. Yes, I'm Dave Ramsey. I'm Deputy Director of Operations with Swift, so I cover CAMS as part of that responsibility. If it's okay, I was just going to kind of introduce the session just very briefly before Carmen gets into some of the details. So yeah, as we said, I mean, many thanks for inviting us this morning. I think in any event, it would have been a really helpful moment to come back and talk to the committee about some of the real improvements that have been made in CAMS over the last 12 to 18 months. But of course, we also need to kind of update the committee on what has clearly been a uniquely challenging time for children and young people, and of course for the service. So Carmen will take the committee through the detail. We're essentially going to update around waiting lists, as has been mentioned, but also talk about the real impact of COVID and the challenges that's posed for children and young people. And of course then move on just to discuss the impact on service delivery and how we see that kind of working through in the longer term. So as I said, that's just a brief introduction. I'll hand over to Carmen just to update on waiting lists.
Thank you, Dave. Can I just confirm everyone can see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, fine, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so I'll talk you through some of the detail then. So I've started off my presentation this morning by wanting to talk to you about referral numbers. I think it's important that we look at the referral numbers this year based against previous years, and you'll see from the data that's presented in front of you that there isn't actually much difference in the total number of referrals that we've received this year compared with last. I guess there has been a difference in how those referrals have come into our system. We had a real pause in referrals during the start of the pandemic, and we received many less referrals than usual. Coming into September, October at the back end of last year, we've seen a real spike in our referrals. So although the referral numbers look similar, the way they've come into our service has been different. Also, there's been a change in the way those referrers have presented to us, in that they've required a higher level of intervention than usual. So we have early intervention, then our core intervention and specialist intervention. We would expect a higher proportion of our young people to be able to be seen through primary intervention and stepped up through our pathways, as that was part of our programme of improvement that we developed 18 months to 12 months ago. This year we've seen a change in that, and that more young people are presenting at that point of requiring core intervention, and we think there are multiple reasons for that, and some of that being the pandemic and the impact on the way we're currently living and accessing education and other services. So that has started to have a little bit of an impact on our system at present, but not anything that's currently causing any cause for concern. It's a little bit of watch and wait. So the waiting list data as of February, we had 67 young people who were currently waiting for an assessment who haven't got a plan in place, although appointments are booked in advance and those are currently being worked through. And we have 197 people waiting for treatment, but that's total young people waiting for treatment. Some of those young people have had a second or a third level intervention that they're waiting for. So the actual breakdown of those numbers, then we've got 61 waiting for primary intervention, so that's our first line of intervention, and there's about an 8-week wait for that. We've got about 106 young people waiting for core cams, but some of those, that is their second level of intervention as they'll already have had primary intervention. And then those waiting for specialists, that's often a second or third line intervention. And we've reduced the numbers significantly waiting there and the times waited. We've tried really hard to maintain and to limit the impact of on the waiting list from COVID-19 and the increase in referrals seen more recently by moving resources around, recognising all the work that we did to reduce those waiting lists. It would be a shame to fall back into a position where there were longer waits again for our service. So the impact of COVID-19 then, one of the big challenges for us during COVID-19 has been access to schools and delivering our future in mind and supporting the TAS programme. We are committed still to working in a partnership approach and to making sure that young people get help as early as possible. But some of the way we deliver some of our universal interventions haven't been possible in the same way. For example, our classroom-based interventions or our whole school interventions such as assemblies. We still have continued to work with other professionals and providing guidance, support and advice and working directly with children, young people and families. But it has meant a bit of a change to our ways of working, and we're sure that the impact and the demand on those services going back to school will be significant. We've seen an increase in our single point of access activity and a higher volume of referrals as described. And actually that single point of access has really felt some of those pinch points because they are skilled, trained professionals that run our single point of access, and the work they deliver can be seen as an intervention in itself. It isn't a receptionist meeting on the other end of that phone, it is a trained, registered mental health professional. We have continued to manage risk and see young people face to face where needed, and that's been delivered in collaboration with other services such as social care or other children's nurses and 0 to 19 service. We've continued to see young people when they've been in crisis or where there is risk that might be increasing. We've continued to see our eating disorder cohort and our children in care. And we've made risk assessments based on the interventions provided to other young people in our system, and where possible we have looked at other ways of working, such as delivering interventions over the telephone or by video link. Some of those have been really successful, and we have actually got a analysis paper that's been undertaken around the new ways of working to understand the impact of that. That was undertaken following the first lockdown, and I believe we need to repeat some of that to understand how it'll impact on our ways of working in the longer term. But we know some families have reported they prefer the telephone and video link access, and actually it's made our services more accessible, and for others they would prefer to return to how we delivered services previously. I think some of the long-term impacts of COVID are unknown still this time in terms of the impact on children and young people's social skills, on their education, on their ability to relate to others, and the impact on families. And I think we'll see more of that come to light over the next few months as children return to school and we start to see how that has had an effect on them. So some of the challenges that we know have been there for our young people in the last few months or the last year is about knowing where to go and how to navigate systems. So for example, we have our single point of access, which now takes self-referrals, but getting that message out into the community has been much harder whilst we've been in a lockdown. Accessing for support groups and friends, so having that connectivity. And although young people are great at using technology, there isn't anything the same as being with your friends. And I think some of that contact appears to have been replaced by accessing services, some of the online services, or some time with therapists. Perhaps they've used that for some of their most normal social interaction. The general lower mood of the population, I'm sure I don't only speak for myself when I say it's been hard to keep motivated at all times during the lockdown, and we all have an emotional health and well-being, and for some of us that's harder to maintain than for others. And actually when everybody's feeling a bit low, it's hard to keep yourself up there. And then the impact on their families and friends, and how young people are really worried about them, perhaps families and their jobs, perhaps parents' mental health, perhaps friends' mental health, worries about education, or all sorts of things that are much harder to get a sense of the norm when you're not with your peer group. And then the impact of social media, we have to think for a lot of young people, their bodies and their lives are changing, and perhaps how you can present yourself behind a screen with a filter might be very different than how you might look when you return to seeing people face to face, and that can be very challenging for young people. And this idea of having to have the perfect home, the perfect life versus the need to be connected to others can be a real challenge for young people. Touched a little bit on the financial implications, perhaps thinking about parents losing jobs or being furloughed is a real worry for children and young people. And of course, education. We know for some young people being in education is a lifeline for them and is a source of routine and containment and normality. And actually they enjoy learning, they enjoy the social aspects. And we know for others education is difficult, so have actually enjoyed this break from education and have found it easier to be at home and perhaps learning more independently. So depending which side of that fence you sit on, I guess will depend on where you've perhaps needed that support. So where we may have seen some higher referrals for young people who were missing education during lockdown, when we return to education we may see a spike in referrals for those who struggle to be within that setting. And then of course we can't think about COVID-19 without thinking about bereavement, and I'm not sure there are many people who can't say their lives haven't been touched by some form of loss or bereavement during COVID. And I think that's really important to think about what's the normal process of grief, and then when it becomes a point that we need to access support and help for that. So where can young people access support? There are lots of support services in Wakefield and all the voluntary agencies that are working really hard to support young people in the community in a different way than perhaps they've been able to access services before, and they're connected very closely to our working relationships within our Future in Mind and our team around the school. And very much the partnership is committed to looking for where those gaps are and how we fill those and make sure that young people have access and are seen at the right time by the right people. We have the websites, the WFI CAN, the Swift and the local authority websites, which are all interconnected and all cite each other on there. So give a form of signposting and a way of accessing services in a different manner. There's the Youth online services where young people can speak directly to someone on the internet should they require that. There's also our service now, as I said before, takes self-referrals, and that's a source of support as well as the point of accepting a referral. So families, professionals or young people can call us directly themselves, and that can be a therapeutic intervention in its own right. And some young people or families have called, had some support and recognised at this time they might not require a referral, but know where to get help in the interim if they need it, and know how to come back to us should they require our support. We also have our 7-day-a-week crisis and our intensive home-based treatment offer, which is open until 8 o'clock every day. And then there is an offer through A&E through our psychiatric liaison team, which is all aged now, and allows young people in an emergency to be seen for their mental health and then picked up by our crisis and intervention team the following day or within the 5-day follow-up. And then we work closely with the Early Help Hub and looking at the support that young people need that might not be just related to their emotional health and well-being. But we know there's an impact on accessing that support for young people during COVID, and I've touched on some of that. But some of the universal offer changes, the lack of early identification, young people may be reluctant to go to a GP or ask for help, and families might not know the difference between a moody, sulky teenager and someone who's starting to suffer with their emotional health and well-being. It's very difficult to pick out what the norms are in these times compared to when someone might need help. There's also the educational changes, and we've spoke about that, but that opportunity for young people to look at themselves against other peer groups and for others to observe them within that, to notice any changes. Thinking about exams, some young people will have prepared really hard for their exams and actually might not get to sit them, and others perhaps will be pleased that that's not the case for them. I've touched a little bit already about normal life experiences, but also those transitions, thinking about young people who might be going from nursery to school or from school to secondary school, or even onto jobs and university, and actually having that normal opportunity to make those links with where you're going next and who you'll be going with can have a real impact on how someone might feel around being anxious or stressed and worried about that. And then the changes to the way we work and the impact that's had on engagement. So as I say, for some families and young people, it's been easier to access our services because we've delivered it in a way that's more accessible to them. And for others, that's made it more challenging. And there's some work for us to do and to understand what we want to keep and what we want to change going forward. And I think for us, it's about that element of choice, recognising actually if this way works for some families, then we should maintain that as an option where it's safe to do so. And just to finish off, really thinking about the impact on our staff and service delivery. So staff wellbeing has been really important during this time, and we've had to consider how we deliver services and maintain the safety of young people whilst also looking after our staff and recognising the impact that COVID-19 has had on them. Some of that being personal and some of that just being on how we work differently. We've got staff working from home. We've got staff who are using IT systems that perhaps they've never had to think about using before, and delivering therapeutic intervention creatively. I think the staff team have been really creative and open to that, and they've really come at it with a can-do approach. I'm proud to be part of a service that's been able to continue delivering care and treatment to young people in the way that we have over the last several months. We've had to take into account the potential burnout of staff working on the frontline services, so those particularly delivering higher levels of face-to-face intervention, those delivering crisis intervention, and to those of our more vulnerable young people. We have continued to see people in crisis even when perhaps there's been someone symptomatic, and we've made use of PPE and followed the guidance for that. We've had a good take on the vaccination programme, and we're looking at our second appointments for those vaccinations are coming through into our service now. Staff have had a real focus on their physical health and how to manage home working with getting exercise, fresh air and getting out and about. I won't go into the video telehealthcare because I think I've covered that already, and I've touched a little on the potential impact on waiting times and service demand, and that's something I believe we need to have a bit of a watch and wait on how the next few months actually play out when young people return to education. At the end of my presentation, I'd like to ask if there's any questions.
Right, well, thank you very much. I think you might need a couple of seconds to recover from that delivery, Carver. It was very right to the point. So thank you very much for that. Can I ask, please, if the presentation could be sent to Lynn Gascoigne? And I know, obviously, it's quite funny from ex-teachers. Andy's put the comment on about an acronym list. Could we have an acronym list as well, please, with the presentation? Because some of us are a little bit out of date now with some of these terminologies. They may well be that we do know what they mean once we know what they stand for, so I'd be really grateful for that. So thank you very much. Can I ask a question first, please? With regards to, I think it's been very positive because of the reduction in waiting time for referrals, and I'm pleased to see that there are now a range of different referral routes. But if you're looking at say the self-referrals, for example, what ways can a self-referrer who maybe have language barriers or levels of understanding, how can they be supported in that self-referral process? Thank you.
Okay, so the self-referral process works in multiple ways. We have the telephone line where you can call and provide the information via the telephone. We also have an online form that can be filled in as a self-referral. And what we have done, there have been some families who may have had difficulty completing a self-referral, but perhaps have a support network or another system supporting them. For example, one of the voluntary agencies have been able to support them with making a self-referral, which enables the family to feel empowered and allows us to gain access to that information, but actually still isn't professionally driven and still comes from the family and young person.
Yeah, so just to add to that if I can, it's just, I suppose, self-refer, I mean, it is about self-referral, but essentially what we're trying to do here are to open up an option around support requests, so, and really just try and have a conversation. I mean, the whole base on which you're setting up self-referrals, that we're trying to create a conversation at that point of aim, really. So it's a conversation rather than getting hooked up around bureaucracy, around referral, etc. It is just about that, developing that relationship with children, young people, and families, of course.
Have you found that by using the self-referral route rather than what was the traditional route to the GP and the schools, for example, that has given you a whole new range of opportunities to engage with young people?
Absolutely, yes. So we still are keen on the referrals coming through schools and for the early identification and looking at how we can support groups of young people and classrooms and schools in general to managing emotional health and well-being. But certainly where we have received self-referrals, it's enabled us to have that really meaningful conversation and create a shared expectation of what the service can or can't deliver and who might be best to meet those needs. Which I feel is much easier for families to manage than perhaps visiting a GP, sharing their story, us receiving a referral which may or may not have that full level of detailing and making a decision based on the information that's been shared with us. So I believe families get a better experience from that, and we as a service are able to gather the information in a more timely way to enable us to make a decision.
All right, thanks. Okay, Kath, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. How do people know to come to you? And I'm asking this because I was talking to somebody yesterday, and she's got 3 children. Both her and her partner work full time on different shifts, and the children are really struggling. 4, 8, and 12 years of age. Won't go out to the house now. Frightened to death of going out of the house, and she was explaining what's happening at home and how the personalities are changing. So how do they know? How does any family know to access yourselves?
Okay, so there's lots of information online about at what point a referral to a CAMHS service may be required. But in relation to accessing Wakefield CAMHS, I'd hope that family are still connected with the education system and therefore could be put forward for discussion through our Future in Mind or our team around the school pathways. I'd hope that family are registered with the GP, and if those concerns were raised there, I'd hope the GP would either support in making a referral or suggest that conversation back to school to having the communication about actually what might be happening for these young people. And some of what's happening for families may be experienced by lots of children and young people at the minute, and therefore there is a need for a universal response to that. And that's where having those conversations with other professionals or links a family already has is key to understanding where they get the best help and support.
Yeah, I think to be fair as well, I think we have recognised in terms of moving towards self-referral, it has been very much a soft launch, hasn't it, Carmen? There hasn't been a big sort of promotional exercise around that. I think that's very much the next stage for us to make sure that is more widely understood across Wakefield. I guess because it represents quite a significant change in process. I think we went at it quite quietly to start with, but clearly we do need to do some more comms on that.
Thank you. I just think it's difficult when people don't go to the doctors often, and there's never been problems before, and then all of a sudden this is happening, and we know it could be happening across the board with thousands of children, but because they're not involved in services to start with, they don't understand what's out there.
Yeah.
And even when the children are being educated at home, they're still not understanding what's out there. And if they're not speaking to teachers, it's where do they go and how do they know where to go? And are teachers, are schools letting parents know that there's things available for them, for the children, or are the teachers letting pupils know what's available? It's just difficult. And this lady were in tears yesterday with me, and I explained to her what were available, but she didn't know. And there'll be thousands of other people that's in the same position. So, and I'm just really worried when she was talking to me for at least an hour yesterday. She was really upset.
Yeah, and this is really our concern about what might come to light when schools return, in that this might be the first contact someone's had in observing some of those challenges that families may be having and the increase in request for our service. But as Dave says, I think the next step for us is about advertising further that self-help access to our single point of access for referral or advice and signposting needs to be a priority in the up and coming months.
Okay, thank you. Celia.
Hello. Thanks for the presentation. It raises a lot of questions really, but I was just wondering, how big is the team? Because you've got quite significant waiting lists, and I'm just wondering how many people you've had. And also I've got another question as well. How roughly, on average, how many sessions does a child have access to with your team? And also, could you explain, in terms of symptoms, the difference between a primary intervention situation and one where it's categorised as a core?
Okay. So I'll go first of all to the question about how big is the team. Well, I can't answer that question in a simple forum, I'm afraid, because we have quite a large team of staff across the CAM system, but those are split into smaller pathways and smaller teams. The number of staff doesn't necessarily equate to the full-time working equivalents, but we did do a piece of demand and capacity work last year, and that allowed us to access some additional funding, recognising that there was more demand than there was capacity, and that's helped us to achieve, that funding has helped us to achieve some of the reduced waiting times. We believe that we are somewhere near having the right amount of staff to meet the demand that comes through. Our issue was around some of the backlog, which we've addressed the majority of that now, and we currently have no young person waiting longer than 6 months for treatment, which is a significant improvement from where we were. In terms of your second question, which was, sorry, if you could just repeat your second question.
Right. So how many sessions does each child on average get?
So it does vary into which pathway a young person's on. So primary intervention averages at about 3, core intervention averages at about 8, and specialist intervention vary from 12 to a couple of years, 12 sessions up to a couple of years. It is individual specific, so it's not you have 3 sessions and then you're discharged. If you're in early intervention, if you require 5 and that's going to make the difference, then you will be delivered 5. Similarly in core, if it's deemed that you might need a longer piece of work, perhaps to transition you. I know we were talking about a young person yesterday who's due to start core intervention, but actually is likely to need holding for a bit longer to manage a transition. So it looks like their piece of work might be ongoing for about 4 or 5 months. So it's individual needs led, as is each referral, to determine whether it's core intervention or primary intervention. And that would be specific to the young person, their needs, how long that's been presenting for, the acuity of that. And sometimes it's about giving it a go to test whether that's the right level of intervention or whether we need to look at something different. What we always say with our primary intervention is that even if you get put on the primary intervention pathway and you do progress through into the core pathway, there's definite advantage to receiving primary intervention in the first instance, because you're receiving treatment then that allows you to enable you to access your next level of treatment. You're not sat on a waiting list without any intervention, and it starts to give us a better picture of the type of intervention that will help you to recover quicker, and your ability to engage or things you might find more difficult. Are currently looking at self-help resources for young people, and we're testing out some BU books which we're looking to offer to young people while they wait between their assessment and their treatment, which is a form of intervention in its own right, recognising that the more young people keep up with the work with the interventions we deliver to them, and the more they practice them, the more likely they are to use them in everyday life.
I think just to add to that a little bit, I think one of the big changes really around that's allowed for that improvement around waiting times has been the introduction of a range of briefer interventions. So I think the model that Carmen mentioned has been really important, and also group-based interventions. I don't think Carmen mentioned groups, but groups have been really important as well, as part of kind of just presenting a range of options and choices for young people and families, but have been really important in terms of managing those waiting times down.
Can I come in there then, please? Oh, sorry, Celia, do you want to?
No, I was just going to say thanks for that. It's good information. Thank you.
Right. Well, in terms of the assessment procedures, then, how do you ensure then that thresholds can be met?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, in terms of obviously, if a young person makes a referral, clearly they feel that there is a need for that, and then obviously you go through the assessment process. But if there are any issues over threshold, what sort of procedures can there be in place to ensure that they do meet them? Or if not, how they are then supported by sort of saying, no, you can't access our service.
Yeah. Okay, so the triage that takes place when a referral is made is through our single point of access team. And as I said in the presentation, they're all qualified and skilled professionals. Many of them have got years of work experience in CAMHS and with children and young people services. So their role is to triage that referral and gather the information which would help them make a decision about whether the support that a family needs is best placed within our service or perhaps within another. We never just reject a referral, so we would never say you're not for us, thank you and goodbye. We would advise a family about where else they could access support and who might be able to help them with that. In some instances, we've made referrals for those families or young people on their behalf to help them access those services, and we would provide them with information on how to access support, perhaps online or through some leaflets and information that we may have. And if a family struggled, they would always be welcome to call us back and gain further support with that.
Well, I think that's very positive, that, because it's good to know that if somebody feels that they want to contact you, that they then, if they don't meet the threshold, then obviously there are alternative routes. That's, yeah, very positive. Thank you. Right, Andy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. There's a theme developing here, isn't there, with regards to the way you can address the situation. But I'm just wondering whether the current model for CAMHS is the right model. I mean, according to many reports, it's not really a situation where, as before, most children and young people were okay, so you could cope with and support a minority who needed either appeared through self-referral or referrals from professionals. It would appear that large numbers of children have been seriously affected by this pandemic, and I just wonder whether the assumption ought to be that the majority of children have been affected in some way, and maybe large numbers would require some support. Certainly once they start appearing within schools on a more normal basis. And therefore the question is with regard to resources, and have you sufficient resources, both cash and staff, to cope with what I think perhaps may be a different model that's required?
Do we have our future in mind of that delivers intervention directly into school, as well as the consultation-based model, which might accept then go on for referral process? So we do work within the classrooms or within schools, and we support teaching staff and other professionals. We have our workforce development programme, and all of those things have been in place for some time. I think what we need to do is get back into school and understand what the demand is, and look at where there are pressure points, and understand where those sit and how as a system we can work collaboratively to deal with that. Emotional health and well-being can be addressed in many different ways, not just by a CAMS specific service. And I think we would look to our partnership as a group to looking at what the needs are of the young people and how we address that together.
It's more it's maybe and you're working, it's your day job, so you know the detail and the data. My indications come from what I can read and what I can see, and it just would seem that there is a massive problem with a lot of young people and children who, I think Kath alluded to the fact that some of the children and families had never had access to or never needed access to a service like this. A lot of young people have been affected so much that they're concerned big time about going back into a social environment in schools, and it's that kind of, obviously it's not something that CAMS in itself can address. It needs to be in collaboration with all the other services, but it just seems that the model of provision that was okay and sufficient resourced prior to this pandemic is perhaps needing to be looked at in terms of, we've gone through one of the biggest changes for children and young people forever, I think.
Yeah, I think just if I can just add something to that, I guess it's important to see this as a system-wide approach, though, isn't it? Like I say, it's not all about CAMS as a specialist provider of mental health support. And one of the things I just wanted to just add to Carmaine's, when Carmaine did the presentation, really, though, was just, I mean, clearly, Carmaine and the team have seen over this time some young people who have been particularly concerned about as a consequence of COVID. There's obviously some young people who really have struggled as a direct consequence of COVID. Although we've seen a small kind of increase around referrals, it's difficult actually to draw a direct line between that and COVID. I mean, it could be that, but really we haven't got a lot of evidence to back up that is a direct consequence of COVID. And whilst it's not to be complacent about the potential longer term challenges, because I think clearly there's going to be some significant economic fallout to come. All of this is going to put pressure on families. It's going to put pressure on children, young people. So I think there's a kind of long COVID issue here, isn't there, about the impact on services like CAMS. I think one of the real stark messages out of this that we shouldn't lose sight of is about the incredible resourcefulness and resilience of children, young people. So that's not to suggest that there aren't some children, young people who are really struggling, but I don't think we should forget that actually that basic resilience and creativity in a sense around managing their own emotional and mental health that children, young people have through their own networks and through their own means. But I think what we need to do in terms of this response, and certainly the return to school is being done as a system-wide response. Schools are really kind of proactive around this support. We're working within schools to ensure there is a whole school and a whole system approach to actually managing any sort of pressures that come as a consequence of children and young people returning to school.
Thank you. I noticed Beate and Andy want to make comments, so I'll bring them in first and then I'll go to Sally. So, Beate?
I will probably let Andy respond in a little bit more detail, because actually what Dave's just said is very much the way I think about this. This is about the whole system. Schools are done a lot of work to be sort of ready for helping children to come back to school, for supporting them emotionally, really in readiness for the learning. And just to remind people that the whole Wakefield Families Together programme, which has the sort of team around the school, the team around the early years, is all about all of us really taking a part at all sorts of different levels to promote children and young people's well-being. But I'll let Andy come in, who'll be able to say something in a little bit more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Beata. Yeah, I mean, just to echo what Carmaine, David, and Beata have just said, really, Andy, David, which is about, if you like, the work that has gone on and continues to go on before any young person is at the stage where there's a referral being made into CAMS. So there's a lot of proactive, preventative work happening within the system now. As Beata's described, obviously, and Carmaine has referred to, we've got the team around the school approach via Wakefield Families Together. But what we've also done in terms of additionality around schools is being involved with a national training scheme around emotional wellbeing, which is all geared up around the return of young people. Initially back in September, at the end of the original lockdown, and that training and that delivery has continued. Our educational psychology service have been heavily involved in pulling that together alongside colleagues from Carmaine's team, etc. As David said, across the system. We've also done a lot of work with head teachers in terms of directing them to regional resource around this again. The system has pulled together regional resources for schools on how they can support young people. You know, as we know, we've got things already in place, such as COOF and so on and so forth, that have been there that we have then used in quite direct work with young people as well, before, as I say, we're at the stage of a formal referral into the system. So I think just to conclude, you know, it's echoing David and Beata's comments around system-wide response. There's a lot happening in the system before any young person is at the stage of being referred into CAMS.
All right, thanks. Before I call Sally, can I just come back on something? Just ask you possibly a technical question then. In terms of the working relationship between CAMS and CYP, how is information shared? And if there's a self-referral, what is the protocol then to contact CYP? Thanks.
Okay, so information shared in the process that we have through our Future in Mind, our team around the school and the Wakefield Families Together programme. If a self-referral is made, it depends on the consent to share that information or whether there's risk related to that. There's some work going on around the information sharing agreements around the Wakefield Families Together, and I think there's still some further work to do in how we connect as a system in making sure that those that need to be aware are aware. But I think we do work very collaboratively with other services to ensure that the young people's needs are met and that people need to know what's happening for a young person are aware of that.
All right, thank you. Sally, over to you. Are you on mute, Sally? I'm just guessing because obviously can't see anything.
Yes, I'm off mute now. Thanks very much for that excellent presentation and recognising that it's not just young people but the whole of society that has done. I just want to make a comment about what the government keeps talking about, this catch-up. I don't think we should talk about catch-up in education. I don't know what the presenter thinks about that, because I think that means that young people feel like they've lost out. I think we should talk about recovery education and emergency education. I think the whole thing about the nurturing is going to be so important moving forward. But my question is, what you talked to us about online technology. What about the young people who don't have access to their own computer or their own mobile phone? How do you support them? And thanks for all the work you're doing, by the way.
Thank you. So we are still seeing people face to face, and we have been even at the height of the pandemic. So if young people haven't had access to that, that hasn't prevented them from accessing our services. It is something that we're taking into account when we're designing services moving forward and thinking about some of the options that we're hoping to continue with. Is the recognition that not all young people have access to or still feel comfortable with using some of those online or technology resources.
Okay. Right, thank you for that. Finally, then, I'd sort of like to say thank you very much, and David, for a presentation. I have to say that obviously looking back over the last 2.5 years now, in terms of since obviously I took over Scrutiny, that the tenure of what you're saying now, the information that you're giving us, the range of services is significantly, improved. So can I sort of thank you on behalf of Scrutiny for that work that's taking place. So thank you very much to the pair of you. Thank you. Is anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Right, 10:50, and it says on my script there's a 10-minute break, so that's perfectly timed. So can we stop the communication with the World Wide Web, please, James? Right, thank you. I think obviously there was a sound alarm going. Sorry, there was a fire alarm going off somewhere. Welcome back after our 10-minute break. Can I move us on then to agenda item number 7 and welcome Craig Liversidge and Detective Sergeant Michelle Schofield. It's a year ago after the Children Vulnerable to Exploitation and Missing team was first established. In March 2020, this committee received a presentation about that work it was doing and the impact it was having. Details of the information provided at that meeting are included in the report at agenda page 13. So, can I invite Craig and Michelle, please, to provide an update on the work of the team and the impact of COVID-19 has had on plans for its further development. So, over to you two.
Yeah, hi. I'm just going to share my screen, so just bear with me a sec. I have a PowerPoint presentation. Oh, no, that's the wrong button. Testing my... Can everybody see that?
No, Craig.
Oh, good. Hey,
Yes.
Yeah, it's there. It's there.
Well, that's at least one positive start anyway. Okay, so my understanding is that the team was formed in 2019, and last year we'd been up and running a year, so we're now approaching our second year. So I'm Craig Liversidge. I'm one of my responsibilities is I'm a service manager for the Children Vulnerable to Exploitation team. And Michelle?
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Michelle Schofield, and I'm a Detective Sergeant with West Yorkshire Police, and I'm in charge of the Children to Vulnerable Exploitation team at Wakefield District.
So hopefully the presentation that we've got will give you a brief overview of some of the progress that's been made within the service since we were last here, and how we've responded to COVID. So, and then there'll be an opportunity, obviously, at the end to ask any questions you may have. So, just a quick update. Since we were last here, we now, from a social care perspective, we are now fully staffed with permanent staff. Last time we were here, well, I think we had 2 permanent members of staff. We're now fully staffed with permanent workers who are all experienced, and the breakdown is there on the PowerPoint, so I won't go into detail on that. Just an explanation, the PACE worker is a parents in criminal exploitation, and that worker is designed specifically to work with parents, children who are risky. Dale, if I leave you to explain the update on the police side.
I can't see your presentation, Craig, but I think it's something to do with my connection issues. So
I'm just on the slide where it's staffing police team. So if you just give us an overview of your staffing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's myself that's the DS on the team. I have 6 dedicated detective constables on my team who's primarily focused on investigations involving the exploitation of children and intelligence, and also the identification and disruption of offenders who perpetrate this type of abuse. There is also 2 PCs on my team that are dedicated missing home coordinators that work, and obviously we work very, very closely with the local authority who are co-located with us.
Okay. In terms of our missing and return home process, we've developed strong links between MASH, the CVE and the police. The missing coordinator, we continue to have daily missing meetings for all children who have been missing. Allocated social workers are now invited to all those meetings, and given the short notice that they have, because obviously by nature of children go missing, they don't tell us when they're going missing, attendance is actually very good, and that's working really, really well. We've updated alongside our police and other partners, the children missing from home and care protocol. and that's been uploaded onto TriEx, which now sets out expectations and timescales about how agencies respond to children who are missing in the area. And we've also developed a resource pack which is produced for families offering advice regarding missing and what happens at the return home interview. There's lots of different information from lots of different partners and specialised missing services given to all families at the first missing episode or extent where or families have declined the return home interview. We know all our children are offered a return home interview within 72 hours. And we've continued to see an increase of young people engaging their return home interview with targets of over 70% being consistently met. And this is for children who are known to social care, and those children who are cared for by us, and those who have had no statutory intervention. All children in our care are visited in person and are asked if they want to participate in their return home interview. And that approach has seen an increase in the number of children in our care of engaging in their return home interview. And the majority of young people who are reported missing on a regular basis are those who are placed in Wakefield from other authorities. So our RAM meeting, our risk assessment meeting, was introduced in March 2019, and is really starting to develop into a rich multi-agency group with regular attendance from partners across the piece, from health, education, liaison, diversion, and private and voluntary sectors. It's really turning into a very rich and valuable meeting. We've developed that further as well. So we've now got two elements, so a victim and a perpetrator RAM, which enables us to coordinate and have a stronger focus on any disruption activity. The terms of reference and associated practice have been updated at MACE regarding the MACE, Multi-Agency Child Exploitation Panel, have been reviewed, and I've explained the role of the PACE worker, who is there, who also attends our RAM meetings, and they work specifically with parents. They don't do any work with children. Michelle, is there anything you want to add about RAM? Have I missed anything?
No, I don't think so at this stage.
Okay. So in terms of the service update, each team member is linked to a case accountable team, and they provide consultation and training to those teams across the area regarding exploitation. We regularly hold mapping activity, and that's coordinated where there are concerns about associations between children and young people. We've been asked to provide training to our partner agencies, and we think that demonstrates some good links. We also deliver training to Safeguarding Partnership. And the advanced practitioner of our team attends the early help step-up meetings, which has enabled us, CV workers, to have a consultation to identify where exploitation is a worry at an earlier stage. So we're intervening at an earlier point, and we are actually seeing some really good outcomes as a result of that. That's something that hadn't been developed last time up here. And we've also now heard cases at RAM where children placed in Wakefield by other local authorities who may be considered a risk of exploitation. And this enables us to have an understanding of the potential risk posed to them whilst in Wakefield and other young people. And these young people are provided support by our partner agencies where required. And that really helps us to establish links between children who are in our care or are statutorily our responsibility, and children who are the responsibility of other local authorities. Actually, feedback we've had from other local authorities, it's a really well-picked work. So the challenges of COVID-19. So as everybody, we've had to adapt and aspects of how we work has changed, but what hasn't changed is that we've continued to see children and young people in their homes to recruit, complete return home interviews, as well as any direct work made by. We've always, throughout the pandemic, we've continued to undertake direct work with children. We have seen during COVID a reduction of the number of children going missing, and we are at a significant number, and are children going to wanting to go and be with their friend. And I think that maybe summarises some of the pressures that young people experience due to the pandemic. Again, we've continued to see children and young people. That wasn't me. We've continued to see children at least once a week. It's actually often more. Our work is based around relationship-based interventions. So we will often see children directly much more than once a week, and if we're not, and keep in contact through other means. And we've continued to do that both for our children placed within Wakefield and outside of Wakefield. We continue to participate in young persons meetings, either face-to-face or virtually, and of course that's all the direct visits have been risk assessed for safety measures that are in place, and where required, we answer any questions you may or may not have. Or Michelle, if there's anything you think I've not covered, please speak now. I'll stop presenting.
Right, so first of all, Al, can I sort of come in with some questions then, please? There's obviously in the if a child refuses or a young person refuses to have a return to home interview, do you in any sort of way sort of red flag that, or do you follow it up?
Yeah, you broke up a little bit, but I think the question was around what do we do if somebody refuses and what follow-up they have.
Yeah,
so
that's correct.
Yeah. So what in essence what the process is that we have the morning missing meeting. We identify a young person is missing or they've recently returned, and we allocate a specific return home interviewer to do that. Now, people will refuse for multiple of reasons, and our response is very much dependent on the circumstances. But what we do is that worker does follow it up. We don't just phone up or visit once and that's the end of it. For example, for a child in our care, we may visit on multiple times till we get that information. And of course, we triangulate that information with our MASH colleagues and the information from police at the missing meeting. So if there are any areas of, if there anything to worry about, we might give consideration to opening a referral in respect of that situation. But we don't just shrug our shoulders and move on. We do keep going until we know and have a good understanding of why they refuse. There are multiple reasons why people refuse.
Okay, thanks. Kevin, over to you. Kevin, are you on mute?
I thought that was me.
No, I'm unmuted now. Yeah, they answering the previous question, the reference was made to she. Are the missing young persons involved? Are they overwhelmingly female?
No, sorry, that might have been a slip of the tongue for me. No, that there was no, there isn't any. No, both male and female young people go missing.
Is it 50-50 or is it majority girls?
I don't have that data to hand, and it's something that I can provide if committee wishes me to.
Yeah, if you could please.
Yes, of
Craig.
course.
It's. Can I just sort of follow up a little? There appears to be, for all sorts of different reasons, an increase in the number of posters of young people who go missing in the district. Does that act as a hindrance sometimes to your work, or does it actually help?
I'm sure Michelle can answer that in more, but I do know decisions to go to have to make the public aware of children and young people is fully risk assessed and considered as part of before that happens. And there is a process that we need to go through where all the issues are considered prior to a poster or a Facebook alert or social media alert going out. Michelle, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a little bit of clarity around what do you mean by the missing posters? Do you mean when we have like a campaign event where you see posters around knowing the signs, for example? Or
No, it's to do with specific young people. You know, I know there's been some around Wakefield, and I think I've seen some in Castleford as well. So it may well be that it's actually families that are putting them up rather than the services.
No, what we will do is very often every missing person is graded, whether they be low, medium or high risk. Very often children, they are vulnerable by nature of their age, and depending on how long that person's been missing for, it potentially can be a high risk missing person inquiry. So a tactic that the police might look to do is to employ the media. We know that social media is so powerful, it can reach a vast amount of people in a very, very short period of time. And so it's about trying to find that person. The quicker that we find that person, the quicker that we minimise that risk to that young person. And so that's why sometimes we will use the media in a careful and considered approach as part of that inquiry.
Right, thank you. Kath, over to you.
Thank you. In the report, it mentions that the PRUs were invited to the risk assessment meetings. Did they attend? And if they did attend, did they all attend? And the second part of my question is, the children that are at risk of exploitation, are they the ones that tend to attend PRUs or not?
Children attend PRUs for lots of different reasons. Again, I don't have to hand the number of children that are open to us, the risk of exploitation, that are currently attending PRUs. Again, that is something that they can provide. The PRUs do attend. There are times that they don't provide information, and it tends to be the PRUs linked to the young person who attend. So they'll attend relevant because being heard at that time. Sorry, what was the? Did I answer both those points? Sorry, yeah, sorry, have I answered both those points?
I think you're obviously just breaking up a little bit. I think you're not moving your head about, are you, Craig, by any chance?
I hope not, because I've turned my camera off.
All right. Yeah, it might be. Kath, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't hardly make out what you were saying.
All right, I'll put my head closer to the microphone. Can you hear me now?
I can, yes, yeah.
Sorry, I must have moved my head away.
I just wanted to know, percentage-wise, is it the children that attend PRUs that are usually at risk of exploitation? And I think I heard you say that the PRUs do attend the risk assessment meetings, but do they all attend, or did I hear you say that some attend and some don't? I couldn't really make out what you were saying.
No, I do apologise. To the second point, they attend that's relevant for the child that's in the PRU. So if child A is being heard and it goes and PRU A will attend. So that's how it works. In terms of percentage, obviously that's fluid over a period of time. So children come in and out of our service, as their risk decreases, and there is a percentage of children that will attend the PRU. But as I said, that does change. I think if you wanted that data, it would be probably the best approach would be pulling it over a period of time so you get a more meaningful figure, if that makes sense. And we can look at doing that. I'm not sure that would be a manual tool for us, but it is something that I am willing to provide if that assists.
Thank you. I just think it's important to know where these children are and if they're being excluded from school, and that's why they're in they're looking at a 6-week out of school and going into a PRU. So I'm just wondering what's happening with children.
Yes.
Just concerned.
Yes, no, I understand that.
Okay, Celia, over to you.
Thanks very much. I'm just wondering, what's the balance between safeguarding of children and versus the pursuit of perpetrators and criminal convictions, please?
That's a really good question. It's always something that we have to balance alongside our police colleagues, and you know, where we're working with vulnerable children, our priority is to safeguard the children. But there is a balance. And Michelle, I know you've spoken about this before. Do you want to come in there?
Yeah, could I just, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's my connection. I could hardly hear that question. Could I just have the question repeated again, please?
Yeah, the question was, what's the balance between the safeguarding of children versus the pursuit of perpetrators and the criminal conviction rate?
Yeah, so that makes a little bit more sense what Craig has said there. For us, safeguarding the child, preservation of life, preservation of property, etc., will always take precedence above a criminal investigation. However, we work very closely with the local authority so that we can try and run both at the same time, because obviously it's about safeguarding that child first and foremost. It's about establishing a relationship with that child so that they feel safe, they feel secure, they feel that they are able to disclose to us, the police, what's happened to them, so that we can then investigate that and bring those offenders to justice. And in terms of disruption, it is criminal prosecution, so that we can obtain those disclosures and then bring those people to justice. Like I've said, it can be a balance at times, and we will always put the child first.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can I just add there, where a young person who we believe has committed an offence due to being exploited, we can obviously use the national referral mechanism, which we do, which can it's a way of mitigating the offence, and that can be taken. We also use that, which we use that increasingly where it's required, and that's again tends to be done jointly with the police.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I was on mute this time. Can I come in, please? In the past, we've obviously raised questions about the number of unregulated homes that are in the district. How often are you finding that you're having to deal with young people who are going missing from such accommodation? Is it because they want to go home and see family and friends, or because they've been moved from the area, or often are there other reasons for it? Thanks.
Michelle, from a police perspective, do you want to answer that, and then I can come in?
I would say, I haven't got the data in front of me, I would say that young people go missing for a variety of reasons. One of them, especially when they are moved into the area as an out-of-area placement, a huge pull factor is to return to family and friends and familiar environments. And so it is definitely one of the reasons why young people go missing, not necessarily just from the unregulated 16 plus provisions, but from other provisions as well.
Yeah, people are placed out from other authorities in a wide range, and it isn't something that we collate when we're doing missing meetings, whether or not they're in an unregulated, unregistered, or we don't capture that information. It is captured elsewhere, I believe, but it isn't something that our focus is on that young person and ensuring that young person's welfare is maintained.
Okay, thanks. Right, Kevin, have you got a question you want to ask?
Yeah, I mean, presumably, if a young person is in unregulated accommodation, am I right in thinking it's actually a lot less likely that anybody's going to report them missing?
No, that's not necessarily the case. So unregulated provision could mean a vast array. It's a continuum, and it's difficult because we only know about the people that are reported missing.
Sure.
We don't know about the people that aren't reported missing. So that's a really difficult question to answer.
I mean, if a child is in either a children's home or, say, in foster care, then if that child is, quote, missing, unquote, say for 3 or 4 hours, and missing in that context can actually include the cases where, you know, the people there saw the child leave, then, you know, after 3-4 hours, that typically the foster parents or whoever will actually report the child as missing. Now, if the child is actually, or the young person, if they're on their own in unregulated accommodation, that who is it that's going to go actually do the reporting? It just anyway, if you could clarify, please.
Yeah, I'll do my best. Lots of just because a placement is unregulated doesn't mean there's no staff. And a lot of unregulated placements do have staff, and we're often talking about 16 plus provision. So that there are staff, and I know that from our 16 plus provision, people are reported missing.
I was just going to say, Craig, please don't think that just because they're an unregulated placement that these children are living alone, because that's not the case. There are staff there, and we know that we do receive missing reports from unregulated placements.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? Well, judging by what's saying on my screen, there are no more questions. Right, so can I thank you both, Craig and Michelle, for your presentation and response to questions. I think members would like to have a copy of the presentation, if that's possible, Craig.
Yes, of course.
For their own records, so it's much appreciated.
Yep, no problem. Thanks very much.
Right. Thank you both very much.
Thank you. Bye now.
Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Right, agenda item number 8, which is post-16 education, young people not in education, employment or training. This will be a verbal presentation, but I think I just want to read something out first of all before we start, and just sort of give Andy and Alex, who will be responding to this, Andy, Lancashire Service Director, Education Inclusion, Alex Longley, Team Manager, HR, Workforce and Development. And it comes from the budget statement, and it's paragraph 5.13, and it reads: Wakefield's index of multiple deprivations scoring was most shaped by high levels of education skills deprivation and crime deprivation. The education skills ranking has deteriorated slightly compared to the assessment in 2015, and Wakefield is ranked as 20th most deprived local authority in England for this type of deprivation. Measures used in this area include key stage performance, school absence, post-16 and higher education participation. The adult skills component is measured using no or low qualification levels and poor English skills. And I'm sort of curious, from having sort of read that in the budget statement, that is there something that we're quite not doing at the moment, or is there something that we need to be sort of looking at in terms of where we're going with regards to post-16 education? So I thought I'd use that as my intro for obviously Andy and Alex to obviously respond to. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Over to you,
Thanks, David. And I think the way we're going to respond or present, I'm going to do my bit, I think, and then I'll hand over to Alex, who can then pick up on the information around apprenticeships across the council and wider than that. Just briefly, and I'll come back and touch upon the index of multiple deprivation. Interestingly, what the data that we've got around the index of multiple deprivation is often based on information that's, I suppose, not up to date. So, for example, there's information that they use within that dates from 2011. So, hence what I would say, David, is it's the position that we're in Wakefield is more positive than the IDM data is based on, if that makes sense. And I can probably, outside of the meeting, come back to you with a detailed answer about that from myself, Steve, and Susan Yates around the makeup of that and where we feel we are. So I'll continue on the sort of theme of data and just start with where we are sat at the moment with our neat figures. So this particular performance indicator is based around the percentage of 16 and 17-year-olds who are not in education, employment and training. And currently, as of the end of December in Wakefield, that rested at 2.9%. So 2.9% of our 16 and 17-year-olds were neat. Now, how does that compare? In terms of the national rate, it's slightly above. The national rate is 2.7%. However, we are exactly the same rate as our neighbouring local authorities in Yorkshire and Humber at 2.9%, and below our statistical neighbours at 3.9%. So we're doing better than our stat neighbours. Our stat neighbours are Barnsley, Doncaster, Durham, Gateshead, Redcar and Cleveland, Rotherham, St Helens, Sunderland and Wigan, and they are they're who we compare ourselves to because their contexts are the same, and so it's always again just a good benchmark as to where we're actually sitting. Now, interestingly, that 2.9% figure, when we compare it back to the same period in 2009, actually was 3.9%. So there's been an improvement over that period. In terms of where we are now. So when we actually look at, so in terms of our statistical neighbours, those 10 statistical neighbours, we're actually on the 2.9% measure, we're actually ranked second. So I think that's an improving picture out of the 10. When we look at how our, we have a percentage figure where we combine our NEET figure with the status of some young people whose status is not known, and that figure comes to 4.7%. So we've got 1.8% of the cohort as to who are not known. That's interesting because that places us in quintile number 2 nationally, quintile number 1 being the best and the top. We're at quintile 2. So again, I think that's a positive picture for where we're currently sitting around NEET figures. I haven't got the actual numbers, Cynthia, in terms of that figure. Obviously, we can break that down in terms of cohort numbers for you. I can respond to that. In terms of young people with EHCPs, post-16, in terms of our young people with SEND, around 6% of them are currently NEET. Now that equates to, I can give you the numbers on that, that's around 8, that is 18 young people. and I'll return to the work that we do around our SEND young people in a minute. So consequently, we're in a positive position around NEAT in comparison to national quintiles, which might surprise you, given I think the difficulties we know the economy is in nationally and where we're sitting. So what we have put in place since September 2020 is a strategic board around NEAT, and this feeds into the Children and Young People's Plan and the Partnership Board, and the membership of that strategic board is made up of colleagues obviously within Children and Young People's. We've got the Children Care team, we've got colleagues from Early Help who are connected into the youth hubs, etc. We've got colleagues from the Virtual School and Inclusion, and we've also got colleagues from Skills and Regen from the wider council workforce, as well as representatives from both our FE colleges, Wakefield College, New College, Springfield Prue, which is our Key Stage 4 provision, Go Higher West Yorkshire, which is encouraging more people into higher education. We've got the Leeds City region, LEP, and also colleagues from the CCG. And the idea of that strategic board is indeed to give us an overview of the pathways for young people post-16 and the effectiveness of those as they pertain to our vulnerable young people, in particular children in care, young people who are in the PRU, young people with the HCPs, etc. So there's a real strong focus now around what that looks like. We have prospects who manage the commission to manage the data for us, and they report in regularly now into that board around the progress that we're making in terms of what the situation looks like for our young people. So that's really helpful, and I think is placing us in a better place. We've also got, then I'll come on to our young people with SEND. We do a lot of work around what we call preparation for adulthood, and Julie Kelly's team, Sammy, who's the worker that is attached to that, does a fantastic job in making links for our young people with SEND. This involves working with local employers such as Next, working with our local colleges. We've got a very strong link into Wakefield College with the head of inclusion there, Laura Lavender, and indeed council internships that we've also been developing, and again she's done some presentations around that across the council, and that's obviously in concert to what Alex will talk about in terms of apprenticeships. We know that there was a white paper produced around further education in January, and again that talks significantly about the development of skills being locally based. In other words, employers having a local, there's a local view about what the local economy needs and how FE can provide that. So that's, I think, some interesting bits and pieces in that white paper. There's an easy summary that elected members can access if you sort of Google it, but it's entitled Skills for Jobs, and obviously picks into some of the wider work that we're linked into in terms of the NEAT strategic board around things like our employment hub, our skills strategy, which links into the strategy around making Wakefield a learning city, and obviously Claire Elliott and her colleagues can speak in more detail around that. You also mentioned, I think, David, links with sports clubs as well. So I'll just touch on that a little bit before I hand over to Alex. And also, just before I do that, we've also got the work that's happening around youth hubs and how that links in again. And obviously, Stephen Crofts is leading on that. But you can see how we're trying to make the links across the different partnerships that we've got that will impact on the provision for young people post-16. So in terms of sports clubs, there's obviously the Wakefield Trinity Foundation, very active across the district, and again they're linked in very closely with the work that we do around holiday provision, and again that will be developing particular focus on our year 11s as they move forward across the summer and what we can provide for them. Frickley Athletic are also included in work that happens within the district, and also the football family. So again, Rachel Laybourne, who's my colleague in Skills and Regen, has has detail around some of those programmes. But we would hope, I think, linking into what Sir Kevin Collins is going to say around the recovery plan, not catch up, as Sally said. That's the language that's being used. We would hope to make sure that we've got significant links into community sports clubs who have a lot to offer around the broad and balanced offer that I think young people will need. It doesn't need to just be about catch up for English and maths. That's not the language that we're using. So I'm gonna pause there, and I'll hand over to Alex in terms of an overview of where we are with apprenticeships. We know Rishi Sunak made some reference to apprenticeships yesterday in the budget, and then we'll take any questions that elected members may have. So I'll hand over to Alex, if that's okay.
Thank you and good morning. Just as a brief sort of overview with the current position of apprenticeships, as you probably realise, Wakefield Council have actually done very well with their apprenticeship target levy of 2.3% set by government, as well as spending the funds. Just before Christmas, it was envisaged by the LGA that Wakefield would be one of only 2 authorities to not actually lose any of their funding, which I think is an extremely positive thing. With regards to sort of younger employees, we did some analysis just before Christmas, and 20% of our current apprentices are aged 21 and under. I know it slightly differs from the 16 to 18 that Andrew talked about, but it just emphasises that we do sort of concentrate on those younger employees. It has somewhat become a little bit more different since the regulations changed, in that apprenticeships are actually open-aged. So you can get some younger people coming up against him in recruitment with some more experienced candidates. We have, obviously, as Andy said, Mike Denby and Claire Elliott's team have the employment hub, which we work closely with, and I've been looking at transferring some of our levy to the businesses as well of Wakefield to help them sort of introduce apprenticeships within their businesses. We have direct links in with the care leavers team as well, and we have the fully funded positions, and we do sort of encourage managers to take on care leavers where possible. We're currently just going through some forecasting of the available apprenticeships for the next sort of 12-18 months, where we think that we could have some opportunities to make the most of our levy, and we will be doing some more summer recruitment for our Get and Go Far, which is typically the entry level apprenticeships. So again, a lot of the things that Andy mentioned, we have links into these, and we are constantly encouraging apprenticeships wherever possible. I do believe that Wakefield as a district makes the most of the apprenticeship levy, as I've said, and we do try and take advantage of the incentives that Rishi Sunak were mentioning in a lot of his press conferences. So again, we do have some plans for the next year, particularly with the Get and Go Far, around promotion in the areas the areas of deprivation and the areas that are a little bit less represented in our figures, working alongside schools. And again, I suppose the pandemic and everything has taken away the sort of recruitment fairs that we would have typically and historically gone to and promoted ourselves at. So we are looking at sort of more creative ways of getting into schools and doing virtual presentations and virtual meetings and whatnot. So it's provided a few surprises and a few hurdles, but I am proud to say that alongside a lot of the people that Andy mentioned, that Wakefield have been quite creative in how we're doing this. I do think it's a positive step that we've taken with the apprenticeships, and there's a lot of things to sort of recognise and celebrate really with that. So yeah, that's pretty much the update really that I've got for the current position.
Thank you for that, Alex. Thanks for that, Andy. I have to say, I feel really positive about the amount of partnership work that's going on and the way in which everybody is sort of coming together in order to ensure that our young people's futures are well cared for and supported and that they make the right informed decisions. Short term, and this is speaking as a former coordinator of careers education and guidance, in terms of the, if you like, the lack of, the sort of the problems of being in school at the moment, are you aware of how young people are being able to make their informed decisions about post-16? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mentioned earlier we've got the e-prospectus, which obviously works as a way of young people being accessed. What are the opportunities? What are the courses out there? So we've got quite a lot of providers signed up on that. There's some work to do, further work to do to get all of our schools, all of our secondary schools, I think, involved in that. But as I mentioned before, we had a positive meeting with prospects around that, and we're keen to continue to promote that and improve take up. We've also mentioned earlier we're linked in with the LEP, and they have a number of workers who actually link into schools in terms of careers advice and guidance. That is continuing, and we're linked in with them on the strategic board in terms of, again, young people having the access to what they've done. As Alex mentioned, we're also promoting, I mean, you'll know all the daily comms that's going out into schools, Dave, at the moment, so we're using that as a vehicle to promote some of the things that we've been doing around apprenticeships, some of the things we've been doing around preparation for adulthood. We've got real strong links into some of the employers that we've used. We talk about Next and other places. So we're using colleagues across in skills and regen to start conversations with new employers around how we get enable young people to be successful. I think I'm very fortunate in that we've got a number of people both in my teams and across children and young people and broader who are really passionate about this and want to see our young people be successful and to become really positive citizens. I think the broader work that's happening as well now around youth hubs by Stephen's team, I think it is important that the youth hubs can act as another conduit around where young people can have conversations about, what's my next step? Where do I go next in terms of that career? There's a lot of work happening around our children in care team with our care leavers, in particular at 18, in terms of, again, making sure there are real clear pathways and support for them in terms of jobs and housing, for example. So yeah, there's a lot going on, a lot still to do, but I think we're in a good position in terms of being able to make a difference. But we know that as we all do, there's significantly challenging times ahead in terms of the economy. It's how, I guess, we place Wakefield District, isn't it? How we position it in terms of the development of key skills, key industries, digital technology, etc., health sciences, whatever it might look like, that we can develop and bring into the district, and ensure really that there's. I think that's what the white paper's talking about, and we've probably been talking about it forever, haven't we, in education? But ensuring that the curriculum develops young people with the key skills that the local economy needs. I think that's the challenge.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that, Andy. I know, I must admit, sometimes you do feel as if the circle keeps on joining up with itself. This has happened before, but nevertheless, I have to definitely say to you that I know schools really do value the way in which the comms has gone on since the pandemic began. So I think that has been another example of the progress that I think has been made by Children and Young People Services. So thank you for that. Cynthia, you have a question to ask.
Yes, thank you, David. Actually, I've got two. How long do the apprenticeships last, and are they different for different employees or different employers? And what happens if a young person starts an apprenticeship and then decides it's not for them? Can they change?
I'll take the length one first. Each apprenticeship sort of area will have a sort of advised or suggested length of of study. It can range from sort of 18 months, and then 3-4 years for some of the higher level ones, because they're linked to more degree level.
Yeah.
So it can range on topic, but also, like I said, it is only suggested. So if you've got somebody doing a 2-year apprenticeship, if they're quite, I don't know, depending on their personality, if they just really crack on, and they're able to gather the evidence, then they may do it quicker. So it is just a very much advised length of thing, but it.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other one, if they start apprenticeships and it's not quite for them, they can always stop their apprenticeship. They can always, there's potential that, again, depending on the topic, if they take one and it's not quite for them and they want to slightly change, there may be some prior learning that they can sort of map across, that means that they don't have to do everything in the new apprenticeship.
Right.
So there's potential. It's. I know I'm kind of giving a very vague answer here, but it is very sort of situation dependent. And we'll always look to sort of support people if we've had people who've moved on to slightly different apprenticeships.
Yeah.
And it is just that finding something that works. We don't want to force somebody for 2-3 years to push on with something that's really not going to work for them.
That's what I was worried about. Yeah.
No.
No. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that.
I think Cynthia, it's Andy. I think it's a really good question, because I think the thing for me is, I think for some young people they do need that additional sort of mentoring support around apprenticeships, and I think that's something that we would want to see, how can we develop that, again within the system, that particularly when we focus in on some of our vulnerable groups, our vulnerable young people, that idea of making sure you've got your alarm set, getting up on time, all of the type, the stuff that we associate with going to work, I guess, that there's that mentoring support around them that keeps them going, keeps them engaged, and enables them to be success. I think the other broader thing about apprenticeships for me as well is, obviously we engage with apprenticeships as a service as well within children and young peoples, because we see it as really important, because there's something about growing your own, isn't there, within the culture. We've talked about Wakefield Families Together and how we develop that cultural approach to that holistic support around families, and you've got to imbue your team with that. And I think an apprenticeship again is a really good vehicle for how you develop people and how we spot talent. And move that forward, and I think it's a really good thing for us to be engaged in, I think, as a council and promoting.
Thank you, Alex.
All right, thank you very much for that. Kathy, over to you.
Hi, yeah. I think the figures are very encouraging, but I'm aware that we live in some quite diverse communities, and I'm just wondering if there's any stats about those that have got English as a second language, and equally what's the kind of split with male and female in both areas?
I think a really good question, Kathy. I haven't got those figures to hand. I'll sort of take both in turn. I think you're right about the I can give you the figure in terms of that number of young people before, so the 2.9% basically equates to around 218 young people. So that gives you a sense of that number. In terms of the ethnic makeup of that, I haven't got that to hand, but I think you're right to I think highlight that, because I think diversity and Black Lives Matter, all of those things that we've heard about recently, are really important. And I think from our perspective as a council workforce, it's important that we have a diverse workforce, that there is pathways through to senior leadership, etc. That is something that I know that is on the minds of the council, and how we promote that. So I think that's a really good question. And again, in terms of that breakdown between male and female, I don't know, but what I would suggest anecdotally is, I would imagine potentially there could be more male than female in terms of, I guess, some of those academic achievements. We know that girls do perform better than boys across the system. So that will probably be my answer. I think you're probably nudging in the right direction, that it's our young men in particular in terms of needs is a potential issue if you were basing it on academic outcomes, would be, I guess, my gut reaction.
Right, thank you for that. Stuart, your question?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's same vein really, and it's special educational needs children and the other people involved. Are there any percentages of young people who, when completed an apprenticeship, gain further employment, full-time employment?
Sorry, Stuart. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, it's really pointing to young people doing an apprenticeship and then gaining full employment after serving that apprenticeship.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I think going back to my youth in the sort of early 80s, one of the things that was a concern about apprenticeships and all of that was that they didn't necessarily lead on to something that was of substance. Alex may have some figures around that. I'll just finish off your question, which was around young people with SEND. Yes, we can get you that, certainly get you the detail around the number of young people in terms of preparation for adulthood that we get into full-time employment as a result of either an internship or the work that's gone on. So we can certainly provide that. I'll hand over to Alex because he may have some insight.
I don't have the actual figures, unfortunately, at hand, but I do anecdotally know that it, a little bit like what Andy was saying, is that Wakefield really do have that sort of career progression mindset, in that it's not just getting an apprentice in to do 12 months of cheap labour kind of thing. It is very much an apprentice in to build your own and grow your own talent and push that through. And similarly, we do work with sort of Mike Denby's teams on with the step up programs and the different programs that have been introduced. In that, if somebody comes in on one of those initiatives, we will look at then progressing them through onto an apprenticeship or something similar. Just going back to the early point as well on the statistics, I can get some breakdowns with relation to apprenticeships if required. I've got something that we did beforehand that around gender and whatnot, so I can provide that post meeting if required.
Chair, can I just come back and say thank you for that? And if we're getting this sent to us by email, could it be added to that pack, to the email pack, please?
Yeah, fine. Thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for the presentation and the information you've sort of given us on this presentation. I think it's good to know that the situation is more positive and that we are making the right developments, because obviously, as I said before, sort of having worked in this area myself more than a few years ago now, I know it's very, very important for young people to be reassured that they have got the support and they are going to get the guidance in order to make the necessary right decisions for their future. So it is really positive to know how things are going in that direction. So thank you both very much for your presentation and for the work that's going on. Okay, so can we go on to agenda item number 9, which is vital signs? And it is over to Vicky. The majority of indicators show performance that is in line with or better than last month. Areas where performance has deteriorated or is below target are the percentage of re-referrals to children's social care continues to be above the maximum target of 20%, and the percentage of referrals with a decision made within timescale by the MASH was slightly below target as it was last month. So, Vicky, do you want to make some brief comments before any questions?
Morning, colleagues. Yeah, just briefly, David, I guess to reiterate what you've said around the majority of the performance being where we would want it to be. And I guess what I'd like to say is that hopefully colleagues can see from the report that's provided that that's now beginning to be a sustained position, so that the majority of indicators are not volatile. We're relatively stable in terms of achieving performance at the right level. We do, as colleagues know, have an outstanding issue in relation to re-referrals, and that's the number of children and families that come back to the service within a year. So it is a longer term measure. It's not a thing we expect to address immediately and overnight. There is a lot of work going on around that that's shared, as I've said before, with the Improvement Board, amongst others. But again, I can answer questions about that if colleagues want to ask any. And then, as David's outlined, the referrals within timescale are slightly under the 90% target for the mesh. And what I can say to you about that is that there's been a little bit of sickness, a couple of COVID cases in the mesh, and that has affected that figure. But it is something that we're working very hard to get and keep around the 90% mark. But if colleagues have got questions, I'm very happy to answer them.
Thanks, Vicky. With regards to then the re-referrals, there's always the possibility that re-referrals would come as a result of what's been happening over the last 12 months, the last 6 months, rather than other extraneous factors. Is it likely then that you could maybe filter that out so that it doesn't, if you like, skew the figures too much? Because clearly COVID and everything else that's going to come with it has had an impact on families and that.
Yeah.
Is there a sort of way in which you sort of rather give that sort of the broad figure, and it may well be that it does go up, sadly, but given, if you like, the modifying considerations as to why they've gone up?
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to do that, David, within the data. I think what I can tell you, and what might be of interest to members more generally, is that the content of the referrals and the contacts at the front door is shifting slightly. So what we know is that a greater proportion of the contacts and referrals that we're receiving are in relation to domestic abuse than was the case a year ago. And domestic abuse by its very nature tends to lead to repeated contacts and referrals. It doesn't often happen just once, often it will be a part of a pattern of events. So that is likely to be contributing to the sort of higher rate of re-referrals in the system. But it's really only on qualitative analysis that we can see the reasons for the re-referrals. We do that very regularly. Every month we look at a significant sample of re-referral work across early help and social care, and we are working quite closely with police colleagues to try and find a way of more effectively screening and exercising judgment around those domestic abuse cases that we really need to know about. The re-referral work has multiple strands to it, so it's not just one issue in isolation. There are a number of issues really all around early help, teams around schools and families and getting help to people early, which makes a difference. Also about the quality and nature of social care interventions, but in addition, some of that work around the front door, around the mesh, and ensuring that we get the right services in place at the right time, so that we don't push too many things through the statutory system that potentially don't need that. So lots of different strands of activity that are ongoing, and as I say, it is a long-term indicator that will take a little while to impact on, but something we're working very hard on.
Thank you for that, Vicky. Yes, it does help, yeah, because obviously it is a moving picture, and I think there's lots of stresses and strains in the system. Are you anticipating an increase as schools start to reopen next week?
We're not anticipating a huge increase, David. I could eat my words next month when we talk again.
I'm not putting you up to fail, honestly, Vicky.
Our contacts, our level of contact and referral to the front door has been relatively consistent throughout. We did see a small decrease as the first lockdown went into operation, but not to the extent that other local authorities sort of regionally and nationally have. And we think that's because of the work that we did as a partnership and in the local areas to keep children as visible as possible. And I think what you'll see from the Vital Signs report this month is that the contact and referral rate has remained fairly steady and comparable to where it was last year. So we think children are still visible, they're still on our radar. We've had high levels of school attendance in Wakefield for the most vulnerable children. So we're relatively confident that where there are problems, we know about them. But of course, that it could be that some things begin to be more visible as more kids get back to school. We're not anticipating that, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that there will be a rise for a time.
Right, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Well, I think you've been let off, Vicky. It's fine.
I think I have, actually.
You
I think that's the first time I've not had other questions.
Well,
But,
I have to
that's
say,
fine, so.
but having obviously gone through the document, we're all now familiar with the document, so I think it's, and obviously all issues are covered, so it does tend to be sort of clarification. So, again, further progress taking place, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, agenda item number 10 is Executive Leaders Forward Plan of Key Decisions, which can be found on agenda pages 27 through to 30. Scrutiny's role is to hold decision makers to account by reviewing the Leaders Forward Plan and having an input into decisions before they are taken. There are 4 key decisions relevant to the committee which are due to be taken by the Cabinet in the next 2 months. Firstly is the capital maintenance of roof replacement scheme update, the transformation of residential children's homes, stop smoking specialist service and holiday activities and food programme regarding the DFE grant funding. Does anybody have any questions or comments they wish to make? Well, it seems not. I know obviously I do have sort of discussions with various people over these matters, so if anybody does have any questions, they can obviously ask Lynn. So that brings us to agenda item number 11, unless I've forgotten something, Lynn. And that is the date and time of the next meeting, which is the Thursday, the 1st of April at 10 AM, and will be held remotely. So I'm just noticing Andy Tagger is typing something, but obviously I can't until it comes up. Can I thank everyone for their attendance this morning? Oh, technical question, Andy. Over to you.
Just very quickly, Chair, it's been hard work today. It really has been hard work with regard to the quality of the audio. And I know I took your point earlier on where it might be people moving their head, but I just wonder, it's tough and it's not going to, hopefully we get back to normal as soon as possible. But in the meantime, we're going to have to struggle on with things like this. Is there anything James and team can do to enhance the quality of the audio? Or is there anything that can be sent out to people who are likely to contribute on an agenda item just to advise them, don't move your head? Or, one or two colleagues who've been talking today have had, the clarity's been phenomenal. I think Cynthia's connection has been magnificent, and I don't know what can be done. I think it's probably some experience that's experienced up and down the country. But as far as I was concerned today, it was just tough listening to what was going on.
I kind of hoped after you just said mine was also very good, because I've invested in a headset which makes me look like I'm flying a 747. So anyway, it is something sometimes I think, I know we've noticed in other committees where it is people are sort of moving their head or they're shuffling paper about. So I know I'm aware of the fact that people have sort of said I am breathing quite heavily at times, so if that's obviously an issue. Anyway, can I have the camera switched off, please? Thank you very much.